Berlin, Germany, Saturday. Early afternoon. It was an ordinary Saturday afternoon in the Prenzlauer district of Berlin. Nothing unusual, no warnings, no signs. Inside a small apartment, a few kilometers from the Brandenburg Gate, a 6-year-old boy named Elias Hartmann sat on the living room floor. Wooden blocks, carefully stacked, quiet hands. From the kitchen came the muted sounds of routine life, metal against ceramic, a low hum from the oven. Fresh bread. The smell lingered in the air longer than it should have. His parents, Michael and Rachel Hartmann, didn't notice at first. No one ever notices the moment things begin. Elias stopped playing. Not abruptly, not dramatically. He simply didn't move anymore. The blocks slipped from his fingers and fell to the floor, one by one. He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Devil's Hill rose quietly against the Berlin skyline. Clouds moved slowly. Everything else kept going. "Mom!" Rachel turned, smiling without thinking. Children say strange things all the time. "Yes, sweetheart." His voice didn't match his posture. Too steady, too measured. "I was there," he said. "When the body disappeared?" Rachel paused, a breath caught, then released. "Where were you?" she asked, drying her hands on her apron. "At the tomb of Jesus." The sentence landed softly. No emphasis, no performance. There were 3 Roman soldiers outside. One was called Marcus. A brief pause. "He had a scar. Here." Elias touched his left eyebrow. When the light came, they fell to the ground. I saw everything from inside. The kitchen felt smaller. Michael stepped closer and knelt in front of his son. Eye level. "What light?" he asked. "What do you mean?" Elias looked at him, not searching for words. The light wasn't like the sun. It came from inside the body. Another pause. It made the stones vibrate. There was a symbol on the wall. No one remembers it. Michael swallowed. "A circle," Elias continued, "with 7 lines and 3 dots. This symbol matters." That night, no one slept. Elias drew the symbol on a piece of paper. Slow, certain, no hesitation. Every line landed exactly where it was meant to be. By Sunday morning, Michael made a decision. He called Dr. Andrew Keller, an archaeologist at Humboldt University of Berlin, a long-time family friend, a skeptic by profession. Keller arrived with a recorder and a notebook, expecting imagination. Nothing more. 2 hours later, he wasn't writing anymore. Elias described Golgotha in the year 33 CE, not symbolically, practically. The structure of the tomb. 2 chambers, not 1. The stone, estimated weight, 573 kilograms, 4 men required. "These figures don't appear in popular literature," Keller said quietly. "They exist only in limited archaeological estimates." "Where did you learn this?" he asked. Elias didn't answer immediately. "Because I helped move the stone," he said. "It was cold. Even at noon." Then Elias began to speak in another language. Not recited, not forced, flowing, ancient. Keller recorded everything. That evening, the audio was sent to Dr. Eleanor Schmidt, a specialist in ancient Semitic languages at the Max Planck Institute. Her reply arrived at 11:03 p.m. "This is not possible," she wrote. The child is speaking a variant of 1st century Galilean Aramaic. Some expressions appear only in fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Where did this recording come from? At that moment, Elias was asleep. The drawing lay on his bedside table, faintly illuminated by moonlight. Michael and Rachel sat in silence, hands clasped. They both understood the same thing, without saying it. Whatever this was, it had already crossed a point of no return. Sunday evening Garsas. Berlin. Dr. Keller left the apartment after nightfall. He didn't say much on the way out, just nodded, promised to call. The recorder stayed on his desk that night. He didn't listen to it again? Not yet. Inside the apartment, the symbol remained on the table between Michael and Rachel. Neither of them tried to move it. They spoke in fragments, short sentences, unfinished thoughts. Rachel washed the same mug twice. Michael checked his phone without unlocking it. In the next room, Elias slept. No murmuring, no restless movement. Just slow, even breathing. At 6:42 the next morning, Dr. Keller called back. "I need to return," he said, "with permission and witnesses." By noon, the living room had changed. 2 additional recorders, a compact video camera, a sealed notebook marked "Field Interview, Preliminary." Dr. Keller introduced the process carefully. Not to Elias, to the parents. "No leading questions," he said. "No corrections, no reactions." Elias sat on the couch, feet dangling above the floor. "Do you remember what you told us yesterday?" Keller asked. Elias shrugged. "Some of it." "What don't you remember?" "The waiting," he said after a pause. There was a lot of waiting. Keller didn't interrupt. Elias described the interior of the tomb again, the way sound behaved inside, how footsteps felt different near the inner chamber. "There was a second door," he said. "Not stone. Wood. Reinforced." Rachel shifted in her seat. "That door wasn't supposed to be there," Keller murmured, more to himself than anyone else. Elias noticed. "It was temporary," he said. "They removed it later." At 14:17, Keller stopped the interview, not because Elias faltered, because Keller did. His hands had begun to shake. That afternoon, Keller contacted 3 colleagues, quietly, off record. By evening, a consensus formed around one word: cryptomnesia. The idea was simple. A child absorbs information unconsciously, later recalls it without knowing the source. It fit, on paper, except for the language. At 19:03, Dr. Eleanor Schmidt joined a video call. She didn't greet anyone. "Play the recording again," she said. They did. She listened with her eyes closed. When it ended, there was a long silence. "This syntax," she finally said, "isn't reconstructed. It's lived." No one spoke. "There are grammatical shortcuts here," she continued, "spoken only by native speakers. No modern training reproduces this." Michael leaned forward. "What does that mean?" Schmidt hesitated. "It means the language wasn't learned. It was accessed." The word hung there, uncomfortable. That night, the family agreed on something they never said out loud. They would continue, not to prove anything, not to convince anyone, just to understand what was happening to their son. At 2:11 a.m., Elias sat up in bed. Not startled, not confused. He walked to the hallway. Rachel heard the floorboards and met him halfway. "There's something you should tell Dr. Keller," Elias said. "What is it?" "The symbol." Rachel glanced back toward the living room. "It's not just a marker," Elias continued. "It's an index." "An index of what?" Elias looked at the wall for a long moment. "Witnesses." The next morning, Keller requested official authorization. Within 48 hours, the case left the apartment and entered the system. Monday, Berlin. The first broadcast aired on a Monday morning. 8 minutes, no commentary music, no dramatic framing. Just a living room, a couch, a child sitting between his parents. ZDF labeled it Preliminary Report. The anchor was careful. Too careful. "This is not a religious segment," he said at the beginning. "It is a developing human interest case under academic review." Elias Hartmann sat still, hands folded, feet barely touching the floor. Across from him, journalist Daniel Kruger held his notes loosely. He didn't read from them. "Can you tell us what you remember?" he asked. Elias nodded once. "Not immediately. The stone was sealed before dawn," he said. 2 guards stayed. 1 left. Kruger paused. "Why?" Elias looked down at his hands. He was afraid. The word wasn't emphasized, it simply arrived. Within minutes, social media reacted. Clips were cut, subtitles added, context removed. By noon, the hashtag #TheTombChild crossed 2 million mentions. Some called it staged. Others called it dangerous. By late afternoon, Dr. Jonathan Bergman, neuroscientist at LMU Munich, published a short blog post. "This appears consistent with cryptomnesia, or externally reinforced memory formation," he wrote. "There is no evidence of paranormal cognition." The statement circulated widely. So did the rebuttal. At 1830, Dr. Simone Weiss, a child psychologist, completed a 4-hour evaluation. Her report was not released immediately. Only 1 sentence leaked. "There are no indicators of suggestibility, dissociation, or pathological fantasy." That night, Elias ate dinner quietly. Halfway through, he stopped. "Put the spoon down." "The symbol," he said. "It's on the 3rd stone, to the right." Rachel froze. "From the entrance," Elias added, "about 4 feet up." Michael stood and reached for his phone. Dr. Keller answered on the first ring. 3 hours later, a restricted permit was issued. The site, St. Michael's Basilica. Authorities objected. So did religious councils. The media pressure overruled them. Laser scanners arrived before dawn. Endoscopic cameras followed. The feed went live at 9:12. Millions watched. The camera slid into the sealed chamber. The stone surface came into view. And there it was, a circle, 7 lines, 3 evenly spaced dots, perfectly carved into limestone. The room went silent. 47 million viewers saw it at the same time. No one cheered, no one spoke. At the Vatican, Cardinal Heinrich Faulkner called for an emergency session. In Berlin, Michael wrapped his arms around his son. Elias didn't look at the screen. He was watching the floor. By nightfall, the case was no longer local. It was international, and no one could agree on what it meant. Tuesday, Berlin. The building didn't sleep that night. Lights stayed on in neighboring apartments. Curtains moved. Phones buzzed. By morning, Unmarked vehicles lined the street. At 8:14, 3 black sedans with diplomatic plates stopped in front of the Hartmann residence. No sirens, no announcements. Father Johannes Richter introduced himself at the door. His German was precise, unaccented. "I'm not here to judge," he said. "I'm here to listen." Behind him stood Dr. Elena Mueller, theologian and archaeologist. Both carried no visible insignia. Inside, the living room looked unchanged. Same couch, same table. Elias sat cross-legged on the floor. Mueller observed quietly. Not the child. The pauses between his movements. "We have questions," she said eventually. "Only if you're willing." Elias nodded. "What happened after the light?" she asked. Elias thought for a moment. "They wrote things down," he said, "so it wouldn't be lost." "Who?" "The ones who stayed." Mueller glanced at Richter. "Why weren't these records known?" Richter asked. "They were afraid," Elias replied. "Not of punishment, of misunderstanding." That afternoon, Mueller sent a memo to Rome. A single sentence stood out. "If this testimony aligns with material findings, doctrinal language will require revision." The Vatican requested full access. So did Oxford. By evening, Professor Daniel Steiner, Chair of Religious History at Oxford University, landed at Berlin-Brandenburg International Airport. He brought 12 specialists, historians, linguists, physicists, not believers, investigators. The case file was renamed. Hartmann. Level 3. Anomalous Historical Review. On Wednesday morning, Elias was escorted to the German Archaeological Institute. Non-invasive tests only. Clear boundaries. Before leaving home, he stopped in the doorway. "Tell them something," he said to his mother. "What?" "The light wasn't magic. They just don't have the words yet." The car pulled into traffic. Berlin passed by the window. Suddenly, Elias leaned forward. "Don't dig only inside the basilica," he said. "There's more outside." Michael stiffened. "Where?" "In the garden, beneath the oldest olive tree. About 15 feet down." Dr. Keller turned on the recorder. "There's a box," Elias continued. "Stone. Inside are 3 things." He listed them calmly. That night, a second excavation request was filed. This one international. Approval came faster than anyone expected. Monday, St. Michael's Basilica Garden. The excavation began just after sunrise. 15 archaeologists. Manual tools only. No heavy machinery, no shortcuts. Security cordons stretched across the garden. Beyond them, cameras. Hundreds of them. By mid-morning, reporters from 40 countries had arrived. Languages overlapped. No one raised their voice. Elias stood inside a temporary tent with his parents and a child psychologist. He wasn't watching the screens. He was counting. At exactly 11:26, he spoke. "A little to the left," he said. "Not much." The site supervisor hesitated, then adjusted. Minutes later, a shout rose from below. "I've got something." The pit fell silent. Dr. Keller climbed down first. The object emerged slowly. A limestone box, weathered but intact, about 40 centimeters long, no markings on the outside. The box was sealed and transported under escort to a sterile lab at Humboldt University. That evening, Representatives from 3 religious traditions arrived, along with independent observers, and a notary. The seal was broken at 1942. Inside were exactly 3 objects: a folded linen cloth, a small clay oil lamp with Aramaic writing, and something no one expected: a metal cylinder, 5 centimeters long. The linen was dated first. Accelerator mass spectrometry placed it between 25 and 40 CE. The weave matched 1st century Judean textiles. The oil lamp was next. The inscription read, "For the 3rd night watch, no ordinary eyes must witness what comes." Then came the cylinder. X-ray fluorescence analysis showed copper and silver, with trace gold. Dr. Julian Brandt, metallurgist at TU Berlin, leaned back from the screen. "This engraving," he said, pointing, "is too precise." The surface held microscopic patterns, invisible without magnification. "These tools didn't exist in the 1st century, he added. "This is a technological anomaly." While the world debated, Elias sat at his desk at home, drawing. Rachel watched over his shoulder. He was sketching the same microscopic patterns, line for line. "These are numbers," he said quietly. "Coordinates." Outside, Berlin kept moving. Inside laboratories, something fundamental had shifted, and no one knew how far it would go. Wednesday, Tata. Berlin, the metal cylinder didn't leave the lab. Not at first. It stayed inside a sealed chamber at the Max Planck Institute, surrounded by glass, steel, and people who spoke very little. They worked in shifts, short ones. No one wanted to be alone with it for too long. At 3:18, the first full-surface scan finished. 47 symbols. Not letters. Not numbers. Both. Dr. Eleanor Schmidt stared at the projection until her eyes watered. She hadn't slept. "These aren't sentences," she said. "They're instructions." No one asked for clarification. By late afternoon, the pattern resolved into something recognizable. Coordinates. But not modern ones. An ancient spatial system, centered on the Second Temple in Jerusalem, long destroyed, yet mathematically consistent. When the conversion finished, the room went quiet. The point landed 2.3 kilometers southeast of the Temple Mount. A modern location appeared on the screen. An apartment building, constructed in 1967. That evening, legal teams began calling property owners. At the same time, Elias experienced what the doctors would later label an episode. He was seated in a conference room at the German Archaeological Institute, drawing shapes on a tablet. Then he stopped, closed his eyes. "There's a room beneath the basement," he said. "About 10 feet down." The room didn't react. 3 languages on the walls, Elias continued. Greek, Aramaic, Latin. Someone's chair scraped the floor. "In the center," he added, "there's a stone altar. Dark marks, not blood." He paused. Water, dripping, from a crack in the ceiling. No one interrupted him. "There's another chamber beyond that crack," he said. "They sealed it, but not permanently." Then he said something no one was ready for. "They kept written records there, of what happened when the body changed." That night, ground-penetrating radar confirmed an anomaly. The measurements matched Elias's description within centimeters. Permission came at dawn. Excavation would begin immediately. No press release, No live feed, just a time stamp. Friday, Jerusalem. The drilling began before sunrise. No ceremony, no statements, just a narrow shaft cut through concrete and stone, guided by the radar maps and a level of caution that bordered on reverence. At 6:53, the drill broke into empty space. Air rushed upward, cool, old. An endoscopic camera followed. The monitor flickered, then steadied. A room appeared, rough stone walls, about 4.5 meters wide, just as Elias had said. The descent was slow. Dr. Keller went first, then Dr. Mueller. Protective suits brushed against the stone as they reached the floor. The smell was neutral. Not decay, not damp, just stillness. The walls were covered in writing. Greek to the left, Aramaic ahead, Latin to the right. None of it decorative. Each line looked like it had been added quickly, urgently. At the center stood a low stone altar. Dark stains marked its surface. Irregular, not absorbed, as if something had dripped, then evaporated. Keller touched the stone with a gloved hand. Above them, a thin crack split the ceiling. Water gathered there, slowly forming drops. Each drop fell in the same place. Mueller followed the trail upward with her light. The crack widened toward the back of the room. Behind it, darkness. A second cavity, smaller, intentionally concealed. They didn't enter immediately. They documented, measured, photographed. At 9:14, they opened the carved container resting beside the altar. Inside were 7 scrolls, wax sealed, intact. No one spoke. The scrolls were removed one by one and placed in climate-controlled cases. When the last one was lifted, Keller noticed something carved beneath it. A name. Marcus. His hand hesitated before tracing the letters. Back in Berlin, Elias stopped mid-sentence during a cognitive test. "They're opening the container," he said. "The one with the curved lip." The technician froze. "They shouldn't touch the 5th one yet," Elias added. "It sticks." In Jerusalem, the 5th scroll resisted removal. Wax had bonded it to the stone. By evening, the scrolls were en route to Berlin. Destination: a secured conservation room at the Pergamon Museum. Analysis would begin Monday. The world, for once, was forced to wait, and Elias slept through the night. Monday, Pergamon Museum, Berlin. The conservation room was sealed at 8 o'clock. Temperature stable, humidity fixed, no outside devices. 32 specialists stood behind the glass. No one spoke above a whisper. The first scroll opened cleanly, then the second, then the third. Routine, controlled. The 4th took longer. By the time they reached the 5th, the room felt tighter. Wax residue clung to the edges, older than expected. A conservator lifted it millimeter by millimeter. At the exact moment the seal gave way, Elias stopped drawing. He was in a separate building, under observation. Paper in front of him. Pencil mid-air. "That one has a map," he said. The room fell quiet. Back at the museum, the 5th scroll opened fully. Not text, a diagram, lines, angles, depth markings, not symbolic, technical. Someone zoomed in. It wasn't a map of the tomb, it was a route. Distances measured from a central reference point, elevation changes, directional markers aligned with solar positions. A geographer spoke first. "This is terrain mapping," he said, "not theological illustration." The reference point was clear: Jerusalem. But not the modern city, an older topography. By noon, digital overlays confirmed it. The route terminated beneath a location now occupied by a commercial structure, an underground parking facility, 40 meters east of the central ramp. Elias looked up from his paper. "The man who drew it burned his hand," he said. "Right side, oil fire." No one asked how he knew. "They followed the light drops," he continued. "They fell, not straight down. They moved." At the museum, infrared scans revealed faint residue markings along the drawn route, organic traces, preserved by mineral deposits. Late afternoon, a decision was made. A formal excavation request was submitted to the Israel Antiquities Authority. Attached were the scroll, geological data, radar anomalies, witness logs, and a single-page appendix titled Correlated Testimony, Minor Subject E.H. At 21:17, approval came through. Limited window, strict oversight. The third excavation would begin in 48 hours. That evening, Elias asked for water. Rachel handed him the glass. He drank slowly. "They hid it because it wasn't finished," he said. "What wasn't?" she asked. He shook his head. "They didn't understand it either." Outside, cameras gathered again. Inside, no one slept. Something was about to be uncovered, and everyone knew it would not fit neatly into anything they already believed. Thursday, Jerusalem. The asphalt came up in sections, clean cuts, measured, quiet. Security cordons stretched farther this time, metal barriers, plain clothes. By mid-morning, more than 400 accredited journalists waited beyond the perimeter. No shouting, no questions. Live feeds ran anyway. Below the parking structure, the scanners confirmed it again. A void. 6 meters down. Manual excavation began. Elias watched from inside a temporary operations tent. A psychologist sat nearby, saying nothing. At 11:08, Elias stood. "Stop," he said. The excavation paused. "There's a container," he continued. "Bronze. Don't open it here." The site supervisor looked at Keller. Keller nodded once. Minutes later, the object emerged. A cylindrical bronze vessel, sealed with lead solder. No inscriptions, no visible damage. It was lifted without ceremony and transported immediately. Destination: a hyperbaric lab. That night, the vessel remained unopened, pressure reduced, oxygen displaced. The next morning, specialists in protective suits gathered around the chamber. At 9:42, the seal was broken. Inside, a translucent, crystalline mass, suspended in an oily liquid. No one spoke. A small parchment fragment floated beside it. The writing was brief. "This fell when the body became light. Whoever finds it will know." Initial scans began immediately. Spectroscopy. Thermal analysis. The material didn't behave like anything catalogued. Its molecular structure remained coherent at room temperature. One physicist leaned back from the monitor. "This shouldn't exist," he said quietly. Electron microscopy revealed something else. Within the crystal, repeating geometric structures. Too regular, too precise. Patterns that resembled data encoding. Calculations followed. The density of information suggested by the structures exceeded known storage methods by orders of magnitude. The room stayed silent. Back in Berlin, Elias slept peacefully. When he woke, he asked for paper. He began drawing. Not pictures, diagrams. When Rachel looked over his shoulder, she recognized the shapes. They matched the internal structures seen only hours earlier. "These are frequencies," Elias said. "It responds to light." "What kind of light?" she asked. He paused. "Not the warm kind." That afternoon, a materials physicist issued a preliminary statement. "If this is technology," he said, "it exceeds us by centuries. If it's natural, we need to rewrite physics." No conclusions were offered, no theories endorsed. Only one thing was clear. Whatever had been buried here had been meant to be found. Saturday, Berlin. Elias woke before dawn. 05:32. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. He sat at the table, pages spread in front of him. Lines, angles, numbers that didn't look like numbers at first. When Michael entered the room, Elias didn't look up. "This is how it's read," he said. Not a statement, almost an instruction. The drawings were sent to the lab before breakfast. By mid-morning, physicists had gathered around the files, some skeptical, some irritated. One detail slowed them down, a frequency, 7.8 hertz. Someone muttered under their breath. "That's the Schumann resonance." No one smiled. Another number followed. 430 nanometers, violet light. By afternoon, a controlled optics lab was prepared. No press, no observers without clearance. The crystal was placed inside a transparent chamber, suspended, isolated. At 1611, the laser powered on. The beam touched the crystal. Nothing happened. Then, a pulse. The chamber filled with light, not blinding, structured. Patterns unfolded in 3 dimensions, not projected, emerged. Equations appeared, not written, formed. They weren't modern symbols, they weren't ancient either. Geometry did the talking. The transformation sequence replayed. A wrapped body, cells shifting, matter loosening its hold. No explosion, no violence, just conversion. The room remained still. 12 hours passed before anyone spoke publicly. The first statement was careful. "What we observed does not violate known physics," the spokesperson said, "but it operates at the extreme edges of what we understand." Someone asked if it was a miracle. No answer came. That night, Elias watched the broadcast from the couch. "They think it's special," he said. "It's not." Rachel turned to him. "Then what is it?" Elias shrugged. "It's a process." Outside, the city lights flickered. Inside laboratories, scientists stared at equations that felt unfinished. And somewhere between belief and disbelief, a space opened. No one rushed to fill it. Monday, Geneva. The invitation arrived without ceremony. No logo on the envelope, no press release, just a date, a location, a line that read, United Nations, Special Commission on Anomalous Phenomena. Elias didn't ask what it meant. He packed his backpack himself. 2 notebooks, a pencil. Nothing else. The hearing room was larger than expected. Flags along the wall, muted lighting. Delegates from 131 countries filled the seats. Some leaned forward, others stayed back. No applause when Elias entered. He stood on a small platform, not elevated, just visible. A translator waited. Elias waved him off. "I can speak," he said. His voice carried. Not loudly, clearly. They asked about memory. He described it without metaphor. "It's not remembering," he said. "It's noticing." A physicist asked about the crystal. Elias tilted his head. "You're looking at the wrong part," he replied. "It's not what it is. It's when it happens." A theologian asked if the process was divine. Elias paused. They used that word because they didn't have another. A neuroscientist asked if this would happen again. Elias looked down at his notebook. "Not yet," he said. "But soon." He didn't give dates, no predictions, no instructions. After 45 minutes, the session ended. No vote was taken. Outside, reporters waited behind barriers. Elias didn't stop. That night, preliminary analysis from the crystal's projection circulated quietly. Hidden among equations were timestamps, astronomical alignments, geographic references, 12 of them, spread across centuries, across continents. No headlines followed, just silence. Back in Berlin, life resumed. School, homework, football in the courtyard. Elias answered questions when asked, but never more. In private, Dr. Keller began writing. The working title sat at the top of the page, "When Testimony Meets Evidence." He didn't finish the first chapter. He kept stopping, looking at the margin, as if something might appear there. 5 years later. Berlin, nothing about the apartment looked unusual anymore. The walls had been repainted, the table replaced. The window still faced the same direction. Elias Hartmann was 11. He walked to school on his own now, carried his bag on one shoulder, sometimes late, sometimes running. In the courtyard he played football, missed goals, argued about rules. Teachers described him as focused, curious, occasionally distracted. When asked about the past, he answered politely, briefly. "I don't remember everything," he would say. That's normal. The laboratories never stopped. The crystal, now labeled LD01 in official documents, moved between facilities under strict protocols. Each scan revealed something. Never the whole thing. Data layers appeared, then folded back in on themselves. Patterns that made sense only after months, sometimes years. The projected equations were studied, debated, rewritten. No one called them proof. No one called them faith. At the Pergamon Museum, the scrolls rested behind glass. Visitors stood longer than usual in that room, reading slowly, leaving quietly. Some asked guides what it meant. The guides answered carefully. "This is what was found," they said. "What it means is still open." Dr. Keller's book was published 2 years later. It sold more than expected, less than the headlines predicted. He avoided interviews. When pressed, he repeated the same sentence. "We didn't uncover a miracle. We uncovered a question." At international conferences, arguments continued. Memory theory, quantum coherence, collective cognition, none won, none collapsed. One evening, Elias sat at his desk, older now, taller. He was sketching something. Not symbols, not equations, just lines, intersecting. Rachel passed by and paused. "What is it?" she asked. Elias looked at the page for a moment. "I don't know yet," he said. "Just something I don't want to forget." She didn't ask more. Outside, the city hummed. Somewhere else, far away, instruments recorded subtle shifts in electromagnetic fields, barely above background noise. No alerts were issued, no announcements made. And that was the hardest part, because the story didn't end. It didn't resolve. It didn't choose a side. What began as testimony became material. What looked like belief became data. And somewhere between those two, not fully owned by either, a space remained. Waiting. For whoever would look at it next and decide what kind of question they were willing to ask.